Lokati here. Today we are going to be putting together a video guide for our Stormweaver Sorceress. I have avoided making a guide for this build because there's a million of them out there. But over the past couple days, I've had a dozen people ask me for a guide for what I'm playing. So I decided to put one together since I'm not really following anyone else's guide. Although it may appear similar to other people because in reality there's not a lot of decisions to be made. So we'll go over the skill tree and the skill gems and the passive trees afterwards, but first this is a D4 Xesht, the gold standard for build measurement. How does your character do in Breach? So obviously Spark is just gonna like delete all of this stuff. We're running an 82k tooltip on Spark right now, with the majority of our damage focused around shock magnitude and exposure scaling. And so our tooltip is really not reflective of the total damage of our character. It is strictly our DPS versus non-shocked, non-exposed targets. Total DPS on the build is somewhere around 18 million, depending on how RNG quickly you spark conduit and you get your stuff down. And we'll see that versus Xesht here shortly. And by shortly, in 50 seconds. Now we are running Flame Wall because it's a little bit of extra damage. Not a real big deal. If you don't get your flame wall down, don't stress over that. Orb of Storms is our single target damage scaler, along with Cast on Shock Lightning Conduit. And then Sigil of Power is just a little bit of nice extra bonus damage. I don't have that calculated in POB yet, but it is something that I will add to POB eventually. POB is still missing a ton of things. And so there's a lot of manual calculations that have to be done. And so it is a program that is useful to us, but it is not 100%. We're just going to have to wait for more updates until we get access to better tools for POB. Get our shitty little loot here. We're running a weapon swap on Blink, which is nice for extra movement getting around the map. We have massive duration on our curse and ground curse, so get it down before the fight starts. And there is our damage versus Xesht here. Each lightning conduit ticks for like, I don't know, 5 or 6 million damage. Dies very quickly and gives us very bad loot. Now, as for our POB, we'll go over a few things here. So the POB is going to be set up with a level 63 build, a level 72 build, and a level 95 build, and my current character. The items, we're just going to have important affixes that you need to look for on all of your gear. And so on a wand, ideally it has spell damage, lightning damage, mana, lightning spell skills, cast speed, and regeneration, for example. And then each item is just set with what it needs or what you would ideally have on it. We're going to have a notes section that will get further developed over time back here. And a guide on like how to get geared. We'll read this out. Make sure your resistances are capped first. Make sure you have 60 total spirit additional first. Prioritize maximum mana because it's offensive and defensive. Prioritize mana regeneration as it's defensive. And determine your weights. You're going to need individual weightings for each of the stats on your items. And I have a video that I'll link below on shopping for a Stormweaver and a video on how to determine your weighting. But you want to buy items that fit your budget with the highest weighted sum. That's going to be the best way to get the best items. Figure out your weights, sort by sum, and then set your budget that you want to spend, and you'll be able to cherry pick the best items for your build that way. And always reevaluate your weights after any major upgrades on your character. For Anoints, Frazzled is going to be better than Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is obviously expensive. This is like a 3.5, 4 div Anoint. Frazzled is your dirt cheap, good quality Anoint until you can get Lightning Rod. We are not running crit on our build. I don't think crit is the best way to go on Stormweaver. You're welcome to go crit if you want to, but I don't think in any of my builds that I see any benefit in increasing the cost of all of your items and increasing the thinness that you're spread across your tree in order to get crit when we can just do fine without crit. For accurate DPS inside POB, you have to figure out what your shock is in-game by going and shocking something and looking under the nameplate on what their shock percentage is and getting your exposure percentage and adding these into your configuration tab. Now I have mine, I do 62% exposure and I do 81% shocks. And so we double stack shocks, that's 162% lightning damage. And you can see over here, it will scale our lightning damage based on the shocks that we have there. And so make sure you set up this stuff properly. Shock down here does not work. It caps off at 20%. So can't have any higher shock than 20. And obviously we have a lot higher shock than 20%. This will obviously be fixed soon and we can stop using custom modifiers for it, but this is what we're doing in the meantime. And so as you can see in my full loadout with my shock and my exposure, we're doing like 18.9 million DPS in POB. This is not going to always translate accurately in the game because there are a lot of RNG factors with hit skills. And so sometimes Spark doesn't hit 6 times per cast. Sometimes Lightning Conduit takes longer to generate damage than what POB is going to determine that for the energy generation. Also, whenever you're looking at Spark and Lightning Conduit, you need to divide Spark by its duration. So my duration is 3.729 divided by 0.66, which means every cast of Spark can hit 5 times. So on Spark, we actually want to put a 5 here. So each cast of Spark can hit 5 times on the target, plus the initial hit. So sorry, we do need 6 in here. The initial hit will always hit the target, and then it can hit him every 0.66 seconds for everything running around. Now that means that sometimes it's only going to hit him 4 times per cast. Sometimes it's going to hit him 6 times per cast. It just depends on your Spark speed and your RNG. And so you can control your approximate Spark DPS by just plugging this in here. And so you can verify your approximate Spark DPS by going and doing a boss like Xesht, who has 32 million health. And if it takes you 10 seconds to kill him, then your approximate Spark DPS is 3.2 million. If it takes you 20 seconds to kill him, then obviously it's going to be less than that. And so you can use this as kind of a judgment, but this is the maximum possible DPS of the build, assuming everything lands the way it is supposed to land. Now for Lightning Conduit, it'll be a similar calculation, but instead of putting in a modifier for Lightning Conduit on configuration, we're just using this 30. And so we have 81% shock, so we have 2 81% shocks. If both of them are active whenever the mob is targeted by Lightning Conduit, we divide that by 5, and so that's 300 or 3,200% more damage. And so on Lightning Conduit, we would come in here under Lightning Conduit. In that case, we would put a 32 here, and this would help to approximate our Lightning Conduit damage. Now, this is all estimations on DPS, nothing accurate. We're working with a POB that is not fully functioning yet. That'll give you an idea of how to get things set up and get an idea of what you're looking at. Now, as far as our passive tree goes, my passive tree is a no energy shield passive tree. So the first passive tree you'll be looking at is an ES based passive tree. So we're going ES up here, ES here, ES here, and ES here. And we're getting energy shield through the utilization of everlasting gaze. And then we're converting all of our other ES into mana. And so that'll be your non-mana shield tree. Or sorry, your energy shield tree. The rest of the stuff is pretty similar between the trees. We have a weapon swap for curses here, a weapon swap for curses here, a weapon swap for lightning damage here, and lightning damage here, and more damage over here. And then we have general things like Touch of Arcane and Mind Over Matter and Eldritch Battery and Mana Regeneration nodes here. And you'll see in the 63 tree, we're doing the same thing. Eldritch Battery, Mind Over Matter become the priority. And then we can't reach all the way down here yet, but we still have our Curse Weapon Swap and we have Lightning Weapon Swap damage right over here. Now, once you move away from the Energy Shield setup and you've got around 5k total mana, you can just run Mind Over Matter as your only defense. Whenever you do this, it opens up your ability to have a more powerful tree. And so we have spell damage all up through here and lightning damage up through here. Everything else remains mostly the same, with the exception that we have access to both Lightning Quick, Branching Bolts, and Wildstorm. And so more damage throughout the tree and more scaling through Archmage, and then obviously a lot more jewels for shock magnitude here. Now for your first tree, the jewels that you want to use are just going to be jewels similar to one of these. You want as much shock magnitude as you can get or ailment magnitude as you can get. And so when you're looking at jewels, you'll look for jewels that look like this. So the ideal stats on a jewel probably be Sapphire, because on Sapphire we can get magnitude of ailments you inflict, and then magnitude of shocks you inflict. Both affect the magnitude of shock. And then over here we can get mana regeneration, and then recover mana on kill. And so on a jewel perspective, you're looking for these. Now, obviously this jewel is going to be ridiculously expensive. And so you'll just set your budget. You'll give weighted values to each of these based on what you think is more important to you. You'll sort by those weighted values, and then you'll purchase jewels that fit your budget. I recommend having at least one recover 2% on mana per kill, and then enough mana regeneration so that you can continuously cast shock without running out of any mana, without your mana decreasing. Once you have done that, the rest of your jewels can all be set to magnitude of ailments and magnitude of shock, because that's going to be both our boss scaling and our general clear scaling. So those are very important attributes right there. For our skills, if you're running the Energy Shield version, the only difference is going to be Mana Tempest. The ES version can run Mana Tempest with Pre-Med, Murderous Intent, and Unbreakable for a massive spike in their damage while they have mana, because if they take a hit, it's going to go to their Energy Shield, and they aren't going to be one-shotted necessarily by small hits. Mana Tempest is something you just have to be careful with. You don't want to burn all of your mana out. You basically want to cast it and then move away from it while you're casting it. As long as you have quality on it, you'll retain the benefits of Mana Tempest for 1 second after you leave it. So you'll cast it and then begin casting and move out of it. And then you'll cast it again and then begin casting and move out of it. So it doesn't drain your whole mana pool while you're using it. We are weapon swapping Blink, and we are weapon swapping Conductivity. Everything else will go off of our main weapon swap. Our Spark are running Acceleration, Controlled Destruction, Inspiration, Arcane Tempo, and Lightning Pin. Lightning Penetration is... how do I say this? So on mine, I'm still running Lightning Penetration. It's not necessary for bossing, and in fact, it's 0 DPS for bossing, because the boss is going to be cursed. But Lightning Penetration is really good for clear. However, the most penetration you can utilize takes the boss down to 0%. Bosses have 75% resistances, and then rares have some resistances, and normal and magic mobs, I think magic mobs have some, normal mobs have none. And so this lightning pin could be changed out for something that you find to be more useful from a utilitarian standpoint. You can pull, for example, persistence off of your conductivity curse and run that on Spark to have your sparks last longer, cover more of the screen, and do more damage. You could put considered casting on here, which would be a DPS increase on here as well, and pull that off of lightning conduit right here. So there's a lot of flexibility with this last one, and you can also just run a 5-link, so 4 support gem Spark, and not run a 6th link at all. So this last link is very versatile on what you want to put in here. Archmage, you want to run a level 20 Archmage with Lightning Mastery. If you do not have a level 20 Archmage, do not run Lightning Mastery. It doesn't really do anything for you. I mean, you can, but it's not a big deal. This Lightning Mastery could be moved over to this last slot on Spark for just additional damage there. However, it is very easy to get a level 20 Archmage. You just get level 19s and you vol them until you hit a level 20. You want to quality it first because you cannot quality it afterwards. And you don't even really have to get a level 19. You can do level 15s. Once it has a +1 corruption, you can level it up to 19. And then once it's 19 with a +1 corruption and lightning mastery, it is now 9% of damage is extra instead of 8% of damage is extra. So that's very important. Orb of Storms are running overcharge, lightning exposure, strip away, and conduction. You can also run overabundance on here, which is what I run on mine. Just allows you to have a greater chance at having those Orb of Storms active with their shocks on the target. Always make sure you are inside the Orb of Storms while you're casting Spark so that it does the shock more frequently, which increases the chance that you have a overcharged Spark on the target. On Cast on Shock, we're running Lightning Conduit, Impetus, Energy Retention, consider casting an Elemental Focus. Flame Wall, we're just running Fortress and Fire Mastery, Conductivity, Heightened Curse, Focus Curse, and Persistent. I'm running Cursed Ground on my version because I prefer Cursed Ground, but you don't have to. Weapon Swap, Blink with Ingenuity, and Energy Barrier. Energy Barrier just means that if you're hit while you're blinking, it can start your Energy Shield recharge again, which is very nice if you're stunned. It won't cancel the blink cast, but it'll start your Energy Barrier anyway. And then Mana Tempest, we talked about Premeditation, Murderous Intent, and Unbreakable. Power Siphon, we're not utilizing. And then Sigil of Power, we don't have the calculations in here for this yet. This is a damage increase, but I haven't included those yet because it does not have it as part of our setup in the regular config, and I'm trying to minimize the number of additional configurations that we show on the screen. So that'll be your items setup, your tree setup, as well as your active skill setup. If you have any questions over anything, please come by Twitch. I'm happy to answer them anytime. If you don't have time to come by Twitch, drop a comment down below, and I will be glad to answer them there. As a reminder, there will be 2 additional videos linked below. Don't pass up on them. One is on how to gear your Stormweaver on a budget, and the other one is how to find your weightings for your attributes that you need to search for on your gear so you can kind of maximize your expenditure. Thank y'all very much for watching. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.